Hi guys, this is Loaded Investor speaking. Today we're going to look at how I doubled my savings during coronavirus and my thought process throughout the past year. You can use the same strategy once again to double down before lockdown ends. So in the words of Sun Tzu, in the midst of chaos, there's also opportunity. Let's dig in. So March, April 2020, when the virus first hit the UK, being a field-based commission-only sales contractor with no furlough, I thought, let's play a game of keeping food on the table. So when lockdown was announced, we saw stocks across the board plummet into the abyss. This first caught my eye as I had some time as we transferred into a digital world and laptop working, was a perfect entry point for me to get into stocks. When we look at the £24 billion company, Halliburton, it dropped from 24 to 4, which is quarter of the 2008 recession. This is a tip-off from a man that cannot be mentioned, but he goes by the name of Wong. As well as airlines going to about a fifth of their price, wiping out 20 years of gains, BP and Shell went to 1995 lows overnight, as well as cruising companies and betting companies. Greedy when others fearful comes to mind. So I thought to myself, is this as bad as people are making it out to be, or is it a complete overreaction of fear creating monstrous discounts in certain sectors? So I thought as long as these companies don't go bust and have substantial backing from either the government or private loans from large firms, these huge conglomerates have to still be around in a post-pandemic world. Before diving into specific discounted companies that are going to yield the best results and still be relatively safe, I had a little dig into coronavirus and how big a threat this actually faces to the world, which would determine the length of the quarantine and if this was large enough to match the massive drops in the stock market, which made it look like the end of the world was happening. So I gave myself a week of rest and meditation after work ended due to the virus, and then I started my research on whether the fear spread about the virus rang true. I've known on multiple occasions of people being diagnosed with COVID for the statistic of their death, but that not being the core source of them dying. So death with COVID rather than by COVID. There's more chance to die in a car crash than COVID, so why are we not scrapping all our cars and resorting to push bikes? And countless more deaths that have occurred specifically due to strokes and heart attacks because people can't get access to the hospitals. But still, here's some cold hard facts. I originally found Q2 2019 versus Q2 2020, as well as Q3, and the deaths have no sort of large upscale to sort of explain that there's some huge pandemic going on. That was about a year ago. It's a bit harder to get that data now for some reason. Luckily, I managed to go on the gov.uk website, and I found that as a yearly basis now, in 2019 there were 530,841 deaths registered in England and Wales. So in 2020, the pandemic struck year, actually less at 529,928. That's taking into account the extra deaths and people not having access to the hospitals that have died, and COVID being recorded as a COVID death being recorded as a COVID death when it's not the core source of death. So with COVID, not by COVID. So nothing's to suggest there's only going to be a select few on the planet fighting with sharp sticks over the last resources, which a segment of the population and the media were portraying, and the massively oversold stocks. But with fear comes profit, and the media generates fear, thus generating profits and population control to boot. Billions of pounds worth of contracts signed over vaccines, so the next time this happens, get me round that table. And looking at the UK paper, they say that the Queen is not telling anyone to get a vaccine, it's just advice, making a comparison that if you're on a cliff edge and someone told you to think carefully, they're not advising you to jump. So according to the papers, if you don't take your vaccine, which is less dangerous than driving your car, you may as well jump off a cliff because it's exactly the same. Becker's logic. It's done in an indirect, metaphorical way to cover their tracks, but it's still going to get into the subconscious mind of those who allow it to enter. At least the Queen is looking out for other people rather than signing Netflix deals and crying, because narcissistic tendencies can never be fulfilled. It takes one to know one. God save the Queen. So, did the virus warrant stocks dropping to the point of nothingness?
Absolutely fucking not.
So I threw everything in the kitchen sink in, including any funds I could get my hands on from banks or savings or assets, into companies that hit the criteria of being essential for life, be it necessity or leisure. Huge financials with likelihood to be backed from the government, as well as liquid enough to survive 1 to 2 years of lockdown alone, or loans from large companies. And giant company that is part of a competitive ring where no one could do a better job, and potential from 100% to 500% returns over 1 year. So, first one is John Menzies. My brother actually found this, having expertise in the airport sector, and they're in control of transporting the cargo to and from the aeroplanes, and they've still done very well even during the pandemic struck year, due to cargo always needs to be transported. I got in around £1.15 in around April 2020, already 100% up, but it's nowhere near its max. It's a extremely high growth company and will be a lifetime hold for a portion of my funds. I have sold off quite a bit at the 100% return to go into new companies I've looked into, which I'm covering in my other videos. But there will be a significant portion that runs in this company to go to six, five, six, and even £7, because this is a fast growing company. I think it'd be its max of £5.50. So in 2019, they had insider trading with Philip Joenig putting in 4.7 million at around £3.90 per share, which was a lot cheaper than £5 where they were at the moment, but way above where I bought them at 115, about triple in fact when I got them in April 2020. He's an experienced CEO, Philip, and he's poached from Swissport, a £2.99 billion company. So Philip is very experienced and they're in safe hands. John Menzies is also an essential link between Wizz Air and EasyJet, and they need to be running for the airports to be running. So any sort of government backing, if they did need it, would be available, which they don't because they're still profitable using cargo. I did visit the airport a couple of times and saw Menzies carts scurrying around, which warmed my heart and my wallet. One of the early risers was William Hill from 35 to 200 due to their online betting presence. So they actually made a full recovery fairly quickly in summer 2020. This really set the precedent of what was to come for the other stocks that have been hit by Corona, but they would take that little bit more time to recover. So I bought Halliburton around 6 and sold off at its peak at 20, and then put that into new investments. Even during the pandemic at the peak, they were expanding their oil fields in Azerbaijan. So I thought, doesn't look like a company that's going bust, but it's at bust prices compared to where it was before. I didn't leave any in. I sold it all off at 20 because of the mass fracking. I think that will slowly be discontinued because of renewable solutions coming in. But I mean, still a huge multi-billion pound company. They're always developing new technology and moving into new areas, including warfare. So, it's a quarter or half the recession, then, you just can't resist but to throw a load of money in. In terms of United Airlines, they were the best equipped and quickest on the scene in taking extreme cautions to keep their airlines working at least some kind of capacity. They also got hit least hard by the Boeings. A lot of them malfunctioned, but they had the least amount on their force. So I thought, that's going to be a benefit. They don't have to replace their airlines anytime soon, at least not before the virus ends. In April 2020, they were regarded as Yahoo Finance as one of the top airlines to survive the pandemic, and they're also entitled to a large chunk, I believe 12 billion of the 50 billion bailout by the US government. So that's there as well if needed. And considering how low it went, sort of in the 20s, down from 90, and it's a growing positive trend company, I'll put my money on betting the US of A to keep their prized airline alive. They also had a loan agreement with Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. These overlords do not loan out money unless they're sure they're going to make a pretty penny when this £43 billion company comes back live and swinging after lockdown. Got in United at 28, almost 100% returns since then, with airline activity nearly doubling by 2028. This is a strong growth stock, and we'll see it fly past its 90, making for some serious dollar. Also got into EasyJet at the time. There was no government bailout actively offered, but they never really needed to take one. The only concern I had was during the peak of Corona, there was an internal battle between the owner, Sir Stelios, and the CFO. The CFO wanted to bring in 4 billion of new aircraft from Airbus. But Sir Stelios said if this does go through in a time of uncertainty, then he's not putting any more money into the company, and it would go bust in around 6 months' time, starting the 5th of April 2020.
Heliocontos!
However, to me, debating whether to buy 4 billion of aircraft in a time like this seriously doesn't seem like a business that's going under anytime soon. And, I could see them surviving for even 2-3 years in a lockdown pandemic. So, and there's obviously so Stelios would be a last resort in keeping the company alive. And also, I'm sure the government would step in to keep one of their prized UK assets alive. So, Royal Caribbean, I bought in at around 25 and sold off a couple of times at 40 as I was swing selling it as it went down and bounced from 25 to 40. However, I am very careful on swing selling these days. I mean, money made, but lessons learned. I made about 5k a week selling this at one point, but it's a lot. I'm more of a buy and hold in now. I mean, I do swing say fastly sometimes at 40% just because it goes up and down with no real news. But a lot of the time, it is better to buy and hold rather than making a quick buck on the up and down. So I just found this gem by looking how ridiculously low it was. It was at 24 lows and usually at 120, and it's a growing company and it increases year on year, definitely a lot more than inflation and quantitative easing. So we first looked at it at 24, got in then, and this is an extremely good growing business in a pandemic struck year. So additional factors applying our certainty to this investment into Royal Caribbean. We saw that every year they have a newer, bigger, better in ship every year. And they secured funding from Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, BNP Paribas, and Goldman Sachs, as well as they're the best in what they do. They have the best management team, they have the best products and ships, and you need a trident of at least three companies globally that dominate the market. You can't have one company that takes the entire market. So you have Norwegian Cruises and Carnival Cruises, which take the other 2/3 of the portion. And if one went, the other two wouldn't be able to take that over. So it'd be a similar management team, similar ships. It would be exactly the same company, and it would make sense to shut it down. So we still have a couple of positions in the UK. Carnival, I'm in at 1,200. It's at 1,700 at the moment and rising. It'll be 3,600 before you know it. Not as strong as Royal Caribbean because obviously that ran away from me. I was swinging it, but one of the three tridents holding up these pillars that makes the cruise industry. So at the time, also, we saw that a Saudi prince put $1 billion in Carnival at 8, and Carnival was one of the weaker cruise companies. So if he has the confidence to do that, then I'm sure that we have the confidence to go in as well. So National Express, growing company that's already fully established in the UK and are looking to expand all around Europe. They're a positive growth company and a strong dividend to boot. I'm in at 244 across ISA and Invest. Growing company, I can see beating highs of £4.71 to reach even £5, £6, even £7. Other mentions I've sold off, they've already maxed out at Park Hotels and Halliburton, nice 100% returns on that too. There is still time to pick out companies that have been heavily affected by Corona as we are still in lockdown, and there's still 100% of the way to go for a lot of stocks out there. So take a look, take a pick, take look at the ones that you like for the future as well, because you might want to hold this even when they have returned to normal, to go on further from there and just let it run. And if there's dividends along the way, then happy days.
So a portion of my profits were sold off and put into BP and Shell. They were just lacking behind the other ones. And I thought as soon as lockdown ends, all the cars are going to be on the road and they're going to shoot up. And if I did hold some for the long term, because they are working on renewable solutions as well, they pay a very hefty dividend. So here's a few honourable mentions that were hit by Corona that deemed just a little bit too risky for me. So you may still want to go into them, but I'm going to explain why I sold on the bounce at break even.
So Ted Baker, I got in very cheap, but it's cheap for a reason. They had the CEO scandals and have been swapping their leadership ever since. I wasn't convinced on the financials at all, and it's mainly retail stores, and I don't see the future of retail stores doing very well. They would have to turn around their online presence significantly. It'd be interesting to see if they can do this, but I'm selling on the bounce and I'm out and I'll watch on the sidelines.
So at the time, I also went into Revolution's Bars, they're a UK and restaurant chain in the UK. They do have questionable finances, especially during Corona, but I thought as soon as lockdown ends, everyone's going to flood out and it's game on, and there's a potentially huge upside. But I did see some better opportunities looking into 2024, 2025, including lithium, with the questionable finances, and it was on a negative trend generally even before Corona. So I thought there's better places to grow my money. I'm out. So Cineworld, I got in at around 50p and it looked very positive. They're a huge expanding company and they were looking to take over Cineplex at the time. But then what followed is they questionably pulled out of the acquisition of Cineplex, which raised eyebrows, and they were mounting huge debts for expansion. But obviously that's not going to happen with the COVID lockdown. I still wanted to hold due to a massive upside. But what was the turning point for me to sell off at the bounce and sell off at break even was they're starting streaming all videos on streaming networks, and in a digital world where people are leaning more towards that is going to cause more people to walk for the exits. I said to myself, even if this goes to £1.20 or £1.50, I don't think I'll regret selling it on the bounce, because there's a lot less risky ways to triple your money in today's digital world, and it just didn't seem sense for a struggling company when there's better deals elsewhere. Some of my picks during the coronavirus, and there's been plenty more discounted companies available, be it in resorts or cruises or airlines. Tech has boomed a lot, but I think it's more sustainable gains to go into coronas, and then I think there'll be a tech pullback once everyone does return to the streets. But what this has given us is a looking glass into the future of the digital age and where tech might go. So use that as an opportunity to see where the world's going, use the profits from the corona discounted stocks and move them into tech after lockdown, and then watch the next 5-10 years play out nicely. So, going off what the average mortal would deem too risky, travel, tourism stocks, cruises, airlines have given good 100% returns, and there's still another 100% to go. I did try and put the house on it, but fixed rate mortgage wouldn't allow me. So, still time to double your money. Again, it's a bit later than when I went in, but it's still a lot better than losing 3% of your savings a year due to hyperinflation, or giving it to an investor that makes an absolute monster creaming off your money and gives you 3 to 5% a year. So, for those who went into travel stocks in 2020, we're sailing into summer. Blue sky coming.